Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday. It is Hump Day. It's my favorite day of the week. Why? Because I don't really work after today, and because I get to spend some time with some of my best friends in the world and with all of you. This is Humpday Happy Hour with Dennis in the Know. This is your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. It is live. And tonight it is over a red Solo cup. I'm going no frills, baby. I'm going no frills because I am pissed off about my building. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. In the meanwhile, I am joined tonight by two very incredible people, two of my best friends in the whole world. In fact, one of them has really kind of stepped in as a best friend for Dr. Chad Duplantis. And in fact, screw Chad Duplantis. We have the dunk tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Ryan Walsh, our favorite endodontist, and of course, my other favorite, Dr. Jennifer Bell. Chad is off hobnobbing with some really important people tonight. So he says. I don't know if I believe him or not, but guys, thank you for joining. Tonight, we're going to have a great time. We're going to talk about controversies in dentistry. And as you know, Ryan Walsh, the dunk, is an incredible endodontist. So we're going to get his perspective on whether to save a tooth or whether to let it see some cold steel and sunshine. So we're going to talk about that tonight. In the meanwhile, we are all dentists, we are all business owners, and we are all educators. And the same holds true for the dunk. And with that, I will say our job is to bring all of you in the know. So welcome everybody to Humpday Happy Hour. Dunker, JB, let's have some fun and make Chad sad.
How do we feel about Donker?
The Donker.
The Donker.
Sounds like a porn name.
A heck of a lot worse. I'll take it.
Same.
Yeah. That's my porn name, Donker.
All right, Jeff, let's dive deep into this because I could sense in your opening you got some shit going on, man. And so maybe just a little historical perspective. I think most dentists, if you've been a business owner or practice owner, you've probably either gone through like a refurb of your practice, or you built a practice, or you started one from scratch and like went into an empty space, or you built a building or did, some remodeling at some point, and they're all pains in the you-know-what. So what's on your mind, bro?
Man. So, it's almost 3 years since we purchased this building. We got an incredible deal.
It used to be an incredible deal.
Yeah, but I haven't even gotten 20 seconds into the story, and yes, you hit the nail on the head. What was a really great
raging good deal.
Yeah. The money that has literally been vomited from my wallet. I mean, in drugs. In fact, as we were speaking, I got another cash call for $15,000. So, that'll be my thing tomorrow, is grabbing another 15K and running over to the bank. But about 3 years ago, a retinal specialist and I went in on a building. It was a gym that was 25,000 square feet. Imagine that a gym with 25,000 square feet didn't make it. I mean, with all the Planet Fitnesses and all these other things around, it's not surprising, but they really needed out from the building. And at the time, during COVID, there was really nothing, there wasn't a lot of action on the market. People weren't making those big investments. Nobody knew what was going on. So we went in, got a great deal on this building. I mean, literally it turned around and appraised like right away for like $2 million more than what we bought it for. Prime real estate on the highway in the fastest growing area of Myrtle Beach, one of the fastest growing areas in the country, even before COVID, and especially so now post COVID. But it's really interesting. The first thing that happened was we hired an architect who was very proud And not modesty was not his number one attribute, but it's still, the guy said he had worked on the original designs with the first architect. He knew the building and he would help us, and he knew contractors, and he knew the contractor that worked on the building, and blah, 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 blah. Well, long story short, after a year of drawings back and forth, dental company, we start to put it out for bids. And one of the contractors comes back and says, this floor plan won't work. And we're like, what do you mean? I mean, first of all, working with another party, he's building one kind of an office, I'm building another kind of an office. There's different financial interests in the building. So that's hard enough in and of itself, coming up with common design themes, things like that. We get to that point, we start to put it up for bids, and contractor says, hey, this isn't going to work. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. Well, these columns that are shown on your plans are not in the same place as the columns that are actually in this building. And he said, you need to contact your architect and ask him if he measured this, or if it came off of a set of pre-built plans or something like that. Sure enough, turns out our first architect never went in with so much as a measuring tape. And be like you do an endo without an x-ray, Dr. Walsh. Never went in and so much as measured anything, used a set of pre-built plans and worked everything from those plans. And as it turned out, they had to move all of the columns in the building. And so none of the columns were drawn where they were supposed to. So that turns into a long lawsuit, and that guy still wants to get paid. We get into a lawsuit. And we can't do anything until that's settled at this point. So we have to wait for that lawsuit to settle. Then we have to find a new architect to take the project on from the beginning. And so that was just the beginning of the woes. And, so we went through the whole design process again, going out for bids. And basically now we have a contractor that doesn't believe in having more than one contractor in at the same time. Long story short, because I know I've spoken for a long time. Long story short is I don't think I would buy a building and renovate ever again. Yeah. I've built a building from the ground up. That's simple. I don't know that I would do it with another party involved either, because that made the process take longer, and it became more expensive because of changes in the plans and changes in the design. So I've learned a couple of pretty valuable lessons, but long story short, 3 years later, we're about to be close to finished. I'll have my practice in hopefully in the next 30 days, but I've thrown so much supplemental money just keeping the building insured and, paying contractors along the way and demolition. I'll really be surprised if I ever end up breaking even on it. Would I build a new building again? Maybe. Would I ever go in and renovate an old building? I don't think I would, because even now we're still finding, things that we have to work around, and that's extra pay for the architect, extra pay for the contractor. And anyway, that's why tonight there's no wine, there's no beer. It's a red Solo cup, and you can't even see it. What say you guys?
Yeah.
Well, Ryan,
ahead,
you've done reno before, yeah? Or have you built?
Yeah, we've done reno in our current office space, and then we're currently looking to build across the street. So kind of I'm getting the taste of the build, but we've been through and lived through the reno. We're in kind of a professional complex where there's 4 units side by side, and we had one my partner started to practice at, and we just grew. So we needed the next one. And so we just built out next door. And then the idea was we'll just knock holes in the wall and walk into our new practice. And just like you said, Jeff, I mean, even things with like the plans were not as is, but they were the initial plans for the other side. And of course, things change, and materials are and aren't available that were then. And it was just a lot of back and forth and headache. And again, I'm not a contractor. I don't want to pretend to be one, but sometimes I feel like their perception or speed or design is much different than our expectations of what we want and or what our patients hold us to. And that was frustrating for my partners and I. And
well, especially if you're not working with a contractor that's used to dental.
for sure,
There's a lot of nuance in dental between radiology and water trenching and the concrete and all that kind of stuff. If they don't have any familiarity with that, you end up paying for their learning curve too, which really does suck.
Yeah, and we went through that. I'm pretty sure. So the contractor that we have said he knew the building, and he was the one. The reason we hired him was because he was the one who caught that the columns were in the wrong place. And so we were really indebted to him for that. And we're like, okay, this is a good guy. He's paying attention. He's on the ball. Seems like a straight up guy. He says he's built other dental offices before, gave us references. There was one like Dr. G.V. Black dental office that I think he said he built. And I'm pretty sure that that's true, because the Atlanta dental people actually, and they've been awesome. The design team at Atlanta Dental, freaking phenomenal. These people have been doing this a long time. They are quick problem solvers. They get right on the computer. They're like, here's what needs to go here. Matt Anderson, who is my equipment rep, he has been coming up every week, checking on progress, and said, when you get ready to cut the trenches, because we had to cut concrete for all of the plumbing lines and vacuum and air, etc. He's like, when you're getting ready to do that, call me and I will walk the building with you and make sure that you are marked out exactly where all the trenches need to be. I was there with him when he did that. Every trench was wrong the first time. Every trench was in the wrong place. Like, completely off center in each operatory, and then no trench actually connected the operatories to the equipment room. I'm like, this is not rocket science. You got to connect a garden hose to a spigot, you idiot.
Somebody's had to have done this before, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, folks.
Can you tell I'm getting angry? I'm getting angry as we're speaking.
So
Solo Cup, I fill you up. Solo Cup.
All right.
I found it interesting that you were that you said you're using Atlanta Dental. Interestingly enough, for our potential build here across the street, we're using Midwest Dental. So shout out and plug to Ada.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep, the Allied Independent Dental Alliance. But we've been really pleased with them so far, of like their initial concept, kind of chatting with them. We just knew we had somebody in our corner who already did dental. And I'm like, not that there can't be hiccups, but I'm like, hopefully we can avoid some of the catastrophic hiccups. But I just thought that was an interesting little side finding from your story there, Jeff.
Absolutely.
Well, that ultimately is the value of me. You can go with a Danby, you can go with, whatever catalog company you want for your cotton rolls, whatever. But at the end of the day, you need those individuals in your corner for all of the things that you want to do with your office that can go wrong with your office. So when things aren't working, you can't call a Danby for them to come figure out how to fix stuff or dig straight trenches as opposed to crooked trenches that connect to nothing. Like, you need those individuals. And by the way, we all have day jobs. We cannot be there babysitting all of these nuances to make sure that we ultimately can build a building that does dentistry someday. So,
and I don't know about y'all, but I don't read architectural plans worth a damn. So
no,
they show me those. They're like, oh, you signed off on the plans. I'm like, but I don't know what I'm signing
off.
Yeah,
you do know I don't do this for a living, right?
Yeah. It's incredible to me.
I'm sorry you're going through that, Jeffro.
No, I mean, it's fine. It's, again, it's first world problems. Like, there's a lot of people I'm in a very fortunate position that I'm able to do this at my point at this point in my career. And I was just so excited about it. And it's hard to keep that enthusiasm, when it just lingers on and on and on. It's like, I ain't getting any younger,
It's been the theme of this podcast.
Yeah.
Frankly.
Exactly.
You got to strike while the iron's hot.
No, I get it. To your point, though, JB, what you said was just what a great point, is that you're just not going to get that kind of assistance. And look what's happened to me with probably one of the finest dental designers, and this is the third dental office that I've designed, and it is my first one with Atlanta Dental. And I'm telling you, they are incredible, and they are showing up once a week to make sure things are getting done the way that it's supposed to. You ain't getting that from any of those other companies that you just mentioned. It's your Atlantas, your Midwest, your Getzys, and your Nashvilles. It's your family owned. Like they want to see you succeed as much as you do.
Yep.
I agree.
I truly feel that when I talk to them too. It's like they're in it for us too. It makes me feel good.
That's just good business, because guess what? When you succeed, they succeed.
True.
And just people who get those kind of relationships, that it's not just about what's the quick hit that I can make right now. And they get that relationship based businesses just work really well, and they hold up even through pandemics and other catastrophes. So kudos anyway.
Really quick question. Jeff, you're drinking out of a red Solo cup.
Indeed I am.
Ryan, you look like you're drinking out of a Pizza Hut cup.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? It looks like the old fountain drink.
I just cashed in my book it coupon, y'all.
Great job. How many books did you read this summer?
My daughter's crushing it right now, so I get to cash in her coupons.
Wait, do you guys still have Book It?
No, heck, I don't know.
I know.
We're in kindergarten, moving to first grade, so I'm not sure. I think Book It hits somewhere, or at least it used to in that
Those were the days.
No kidding.
Can I ask what that is?
I knew he was going to.
Shh.
Nope.
It's Insta what?
Well, I don't know that Jeff lived in a state where they rewarded reading or encouraged reading.
That's true.
You got a free Pizza Hut personal pan pizza if you read so many books. You got these little sticker cards so you could take it to Pizza Hut. It was super awesome. You always looked forward to getting your free personal pan pizza, and then that's how you were incentivized to read.
You mean I could have gotten a pizza for reading a book? Because I should be freaking Einstein then.
Yeah.
If I'd have known I could get a pizza
button with little stars that you could get on it. Like you could be very braggadocious about your achievements.
I just got stupid. Well, I really didn't get the ribbons because I didn't like reading books that much, and no one was giving me a free pizza. So
no, you had to have an incentive.
Yeah.
Although Tanya Sue said you only had stone tablets, so that's why you didn't have the button.
Wow, everyone piling on tonight. My God.
No sympathy for the injured or the lame.
I'm telling you, they can smell the blood.
They do. They're powerful.
I'm so glad you got that reference, though. That made me so happy.
Yes. I wish we still had it, except I don't want to go to Pizza Hut.
Yeah, exactly. Although every now and then I do get a craving for a large pan supreme. Like it's not pizza. It's just one of those things. Like I can't really call it pizza, but it's this thing that every now and then I'm just like, a pan supreme sounds really good right now.
It's pretty nostalgic.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, do you have some news tonight, Jay?
I actually do, dude.
All right. Donker and I are going down and do some news, and then we'll come back.
I can't wait to get your reactions on a few of these.
All right. So I'm taking us down, and then we'll talk save or not.
Okay. Chad will be really proud of you for doing that.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Mm-hmm.
He's so anal. Whoop. Hey, now, I ain't got your news.
No, not yet. All right, team. So, some interesting news has developed in the world of dentistry over the last week. I didn't really have much to report, last week. So, we dove right into the controversies. But this week, we have a few new updates to share. The first, which I think was probably the most titillating, was Minnesota is now the first state that is offering licensure and certification for dental assistants to apply dental anesthesia or local anesthetics to patients. They can do like periosteal injections, super periosteal injections, and infiltrations, no blocks. But it's the first state to go online as offering their licensed dental assistants. They have to have practiced for 1 year in the state to be able to apply for the 45-hour program, CE program, that would give them certification to administer local anesthesia on patients. Now, this is a big change. I live in a state that just recently gave the licensure capability for dental anesthesia to dental hygienists, and we've only been doing that for a few years now. So we're already seeing the pendulum continue to shift. The belief is that this continues to be in response to the fact that many dentists are struggling to find support personnel, both dental assistants and dental hygienists. And so one, offering career advancement within the dental assisting arena, but also maybe filling some gaps in the dental hygiene space as well, if they're unable to find those that could currently administer anesthesia in their practice. So Minnesota now online as the first dental assisting opportunity for local anesthesia. Another interesting story that came out of the ADA this week, they have sent a legal brief to the Supreme Court requesting that they pick up a particular case. Well, not really a case necessarily, but to look at a lower ruling that happened in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals. So let's get into the weeds a little bit about dental insurance. So we've talked about this before on our program, but you have two kind of buckets in which insurance operates. You have those that follow state regulatory apparatuses or state laws. And then you have those that fall under ERISA or federal laws. Those that fall under the federal laws are typically federally funded programs, like large government dental insurance programs, but also self-funded programs. So let's just say a large company like Google or Facebook might have self-funded plans because it's cheaper for them just to pay for their employees to receive care as opposed to paying a third party to administer it. One caveat, when you call the dental insurance company to ask, is this a self-funded or federal plan versus a state-regulated plan, you will not get an answer. They will not tell you. Now, why is this important? Because state plans fall under the state laws. So if your state happens to have a law that states that non-covered services are able to be billed at your current fee schedule versus those that are covered services, which would fall under your contracted rate, that's a big difference. Let's say you're doing 15 veneers on a patient. They have dental insurance. It's not going to be a covered procedure because it's an aesthetic case. You would like to bill them for the cost of doing that particular aesthetic service. And if it's a self-funded plan, you have to honor your contracted rate instead of falling under the state regulation that would allow you to charge your full fee. So the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals had a case that they were dealing with actually out of Oklahoma. They upheld the current operating understanding that the federal law will supersede the state law in those particular scenarios. The muddy water is incredibly difficult for dentists to be able to quote services to patients, to be able to honor that no surprise billing law that we're also held under as well. And so the ADA is now taken it to the Supreme Court and asked them to take up this case to make a final ruling on whether or not states' laws will apply for those cases where it is applicable versus federal laws. And if the state laws states that you are allowed to charge for non-covered services or whatever the nuances are of that particular state, that state law should supersede the federal law in which the insurance filing has occurred. It's very complicated and convoluted, but it is actually nice to see the ADA stepping in and saying, We want to advocate for the dentists in this particular scenario. We need transparency, and we need dentists to be able to operate within their own state laws because at least they know those laws. It's very straightforward at that point. And since you can't call a dental insurance company to get clarity on whether or not these are self-funded plans, government plans, et cetera, it would make it a lot easier to be able to quote patients appropriately. So we're watching that very closely. We'll see if the Supreme Court will take that up maybe in the fall. All right. The last little bit of information, which I found really interesting as a chewing gum chewer, is that a recent study just came out potentially identifying xylitol as an increased risk to heart attacks and strokes. This came from a press release from the Cleveland Clinic on June 6th. More studies will come from this for sure. It's the first red flag we've seen to indicate that maybe xylitol may have some adverse side effects, one of which we already know is digestive and intestinal distress, but it seems like there may be some cardiovascular contraindications as well. This is super important for us because many of us recommend gum chewing for salivary stimulation and for caries management, particularly ones that have xylitol in it. So we'll definitely be watching the development of this very closely. There was a large study that was released out of the European Heart Journal. 3,000 patients were reviewed and did identify at least an increased risk of cardiovascular events for those patients that had a higher consumption of xylitol in their diet. So we'll definitely be watching that very closely. And with that, that's the news. Are you pulling a Chad?
No, and I wanted to be faster on the trigger, but between my two screens, my cursor got lost. I couldn't find the cursor.
Couldn't find it?
Couldn't find it. It's white. There's a white background. It was hidden. I started panicking and swirling my finger.
I was going to be here waiting for you. Don't worry. I was going to respond to Chris's comment. The case came out of Oklahoma. It was actually a pharmacy case where they were discussing Oklahoma law regulating pharmacy benefit managers, which manage prescription drug benefits on behalf of health plans by negotiating prices with drug manufacturers. That actually, the ERISA piece of that was applied to the pharmacy case. So anyway, that's the current momentum from the ADA on that.
So let's first talk about what happened in Minnesota, Marquette country for you.
Yeah, anything above, like west of the Mississippi River.
Marquette is in any state above Kentucky.
Anywhere that gets snow. And yeah, they're all the same. Little square states.
So, but you did say dental assistants, not dental hygienists, correct?
Correct.
Okay. That's pretty interesting because literally there's still a lot of things that dental hygienists cannot do here in South Carolina. It was a few years before you as far as allowing hygienists to give local anesthesia, but they're still not allowed to give a block even with all that training. And it's a little bit of a slap in the face, but I get it. I don't think 45 hours to do some kind of infiltration is, that's not a small ask, but I do worry about any kind of online course for something that has the kind of implications that local anesthesia does.
As best I could tell from the research that I did, it'll look a lot like the course actually that we have in North Carolina for our dental hygienists. It's a certain percentage of didactic. It can be online or in person, depending on the school or curriculum you choose. But the actual clinical piece is in person, and they have to administer so many infiltrations and injections, and they have to go through some in-person training.
So there definitely will be a hands-on portion of this. It will
what
not
I
be
have seen so far, and at least in North Carolina, That's what's required of our dental hygienists as well. They have a didactic portion, but they also have a hands-on.
All right. And I'm all right with that.
1 year of dental assisting, though, is pretty short. Like you have to have done, there's a whole licensure requirement for their dental assistants, and it's fairly rigorous. I mean, they have to have gone through a CODA accredited dental assisting school, or I didn't see a caveat for in-office trained, but I probably didn't maybe dig super deep into the requirements. And then 1 year of practice, if they've had 1 year of dental assisting practice. But I was thinking like, what that would look like in my state where we have in-office trained dental assistants. And after they do 3,000 hours, they qualify for a DA2 status. But I can tell you they're very far away from being a fully trained DA2.
That's like 1 week in your practice, 3,000 hours.
That's right. That was last Tuesday. Mm-hmm. We certified 10 dental assistants on Tuesday. But the thing is, though, after that 3,000 hours, they're technically a DA2, but they actually haven't been able to do a lot of expanded function procedures. So now you have to go through the onboarding and training to get them to the next level, which is much more difficult. And at what point would they then be qualified or competent enough to sit for dental anesthesia? So super interesting to see. And it is interesting if they're doing this as a response to not being able to find dental hygienists to come in. And then they're using these as super anesthesiologists who can come in and basically do a bunch of injections and infiltrations for them and allow the dentist to sort of maximize their time doing preppable procedures only and not wasting time on injections, et cetera. So could be an interesting business model, I think.
Let's hear the endodontist perspective. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, Ryan.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, especially as an endodontist. I don't have a hygienist, right? So I have endodontist and assistant. And I feel that it's really interesting, again, not coming from a 3-tier practice model, that my assistants watch me numb or are present during anesthesia every time.
Right.
I mean, I said this about their radiographic assessments, and like I would put them up against some dental students, and I think their anesthesia skills would probably be similar if they had a little bit more training and some of the medicine, the drugs that we're actually administering, and some anatomical considerations. I don't think they'd be that far off. I think they'd be pretty darn good at what they're doing. I mean, they've seen thousands and thousands and thousands of them. But again, that's kind of a small niche, right? Of, if you're talking about minimal requirements of, so many thousands of hours, 1 year worth of practice, like hopping in, like, I don't know that I would trust some dental assistants at 1 year. I don't know that I trust some dental students at 1 year, but I think that's interesting that in Minnesota, they've been like the cutting edge of a few different things, like mid-level providers, kind of the cutting edge of a few different dental trends. I find that pretty interesting.
I do continue to advocate for opportunities for any level of provider in dentistry to have professional advancement, because it does seem frustrating for dental assistants, dental hygienists. You can definitely get stagnant in that career because you have a skill and it's the only legal way in which you can apply the skill. So like Alabama has a super interesting program of how they'll take dental assistants, high-level dental assistants, and move them into a dental hygiene model. They're in-office trained dental hygienists. The doctors have to go through a whole, like to be an educator, you also have to go through a whole training program. And then you can onboard your identified dental assistants, or you can bring some in and move them through a hygiene training program. And the data is really good actually on that program. But think about how you're then able to take those that feel like they can't take time away from their families. They can't go back to school. They don't have the time, money, resources, bandwidth, whatever, but they still want to continue to grow in the profession. And you can only buy so much technology. You can only bring so many things into the practice to keep them engaged and interested in what you're doing. And a lot of times you lose those dental assistants along the way because they need something new. They need something interesting to spice up their life a little bit and see other ways of practicing dentistry. But if the career path had those opportunities sort of embedded in it, that you could continue to provide them advancement as they prove to be competent and intelligent in their career, that would be so much more rewarding. We want the same. as dentists, that's why we do all these CE courses and everything, because we want to grow and advance as well. So it'd be nice to have our support team have the same opportunities.
Well, great point. And that was actually a little controversy in and of itself.
I know. We just love to dabble in the controversies.
Yeah, we do. But really, the reason we wanted Ryan on so much tonight was because we hate Chad. No, it's because we were talking about the controversy of whether or not to save teeth, when to say, cold steel and sunshine, let's put an implant in here. And when we make those decisions, how difficult it can be, and how really that has changed over the years. I mean, we've gone through this whole thing of save a tooth at any expense to get that thing out of here and let's throw an implant in, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Back to, guess what? Implants have their own set of problems. Maybe we should have considered a little more heroism with the natural tooth structures. So let me start with you, JB. Where do you draw the line, or do you have a line in the sand as to when you say, you know what, I'm not even going to make a referral to the endodontist? Or do you just send them to the endodontist and have them assist with that decision-making process?
I think it's multifaceted. First, if they're symptom-free, I'll go ahead and see if I can restore it first before I send it to the endodontist to even see if I can get a margin. Can I get access to it? Can I get it clean? If they're symptomatic, it becomes a little bit more tricky, because to go in and do caries excavation and stir up the hornet's nest means everybody's getting blown up on their cell phones for the next 7 days while we sort of manage that patient through. And if you're comfortable doing a bunch of pulpotomies and pulpectomies, fine. But for those of us who don't particularly enjoy that nor have it budgeted in our schedule, it becomes a little bit more challenging. I think for me, one hard line in the sand that I have definitely drawn over the last 10 years, and that's developed over time, is that I like to live in the land where it was our last resort for an implant. And I want patients to choose the implant pathway because we had run out of options. Now, that might be because they've chosen they don't want to invest in the tooth. They don't want to pay for the root canal crown. That's fine. What I don't want to live in the world is, and you've seen this, and I know you've all experienced it, where the patient comes in and said, I wish I had never taken that tooth out. Like, I don't want to live in that world. I want to live in the world of, I hate this implant, it failed, whatever, but I get it. I was out of options, and it was, the last ditch effort. If I coerce, convince, entice a patient to pursue implant dentistry, I want to make sure that they're all in on that particular decision, and we're moving forward with no regret from the back end. And that's definitely something that I've critiqued and modified over time, because when you see enough of them fail or have issues down the road, you realize that it's not the 92 to 95% success rate that we may have been taught in dental school.
No, I get that. And I've been that guy. I mean, I've been the person who has regretted saying to a patient, I really would just get that out. And, having had a patient listen to me and then seeing the implant, get some localized bone loss. And then we have to talk, like, but you said this was the way to go to not have problems down the road. And, it really just took seeing that to realize that, I shouldn't have been so hard-nosed about that. In fact, so a physician from our area who had been coming to me for a long time sat in my chair, anesthesiologist. And I was going to have to do crown lengthening, endo. I wasn't going to do the endo, but it was endo, crown lengthening. I'm going to have to do a big core buildup. And then I told him, I said, listen, I don't know what the 10-year prognosis looks like on this. Let's put an implant in, because I can tell you, and this is exactly how I said it. I can tell you the 10-year prognosis is going to be better for the implant. And he was like, I don't care. I want to save the tooth. And I argued with him at the time. And new me would not argue anymore. New me would say, you know what? You're okay with keeping that tooth as long as you can keep it. That's probably brilliant. And yet I was so short-sighted thinking that, there was going to be, the likelihood of problems were going to be so much less if we just got it out and put the implant in, that I argued with him. He went to another dentist, actually went up to Columbia, went to another dentist and had the crown lengthening, the endo, and still has the tooth. And really, I was the idiot. So what are your thoughts, Ryan?
No, I don't think you were the idiot. It's like, at least not for that reason.
Everyone's on tonight. Yeah. Good on you, mate.
I think we live in a beautiful world right now where now we have a good track record of modern endo. Let me make that a caveat, and a good track record of modern implants. And I mean, for instance, today I referred 2 patients over to our oral surgeon and one surgeon and one periodontist for implant placement. We're in a world now where we have good predictability either way. And so if you can predictably save a tooth, I think most patients will opt for that. Some are just, if there's any doubt that it's going to fail, just give me an implant. I'm like, oh, okay. But I've also had a good handful, or I say a good handful, many patients who've come to me and said, I've already had one implant. I'd really like to avoid another if I can. And then I've also had the surgeons and periodontists that I work with that say implants are a great replacement, but they're just that. They're a replacement for a tooth. And so I think we live in a world now where we have really predictable modern endo and we have really predictable modern implants. And so, if you can't predictably save a tooth, well, then great. Let's get that patient to something that, like you said, Jeff, that has a better predictable 10-year outcome. You never know. You never know. But, we try to give our patients the best judgment that we can. And, I don't know that, like JB said, it's multifaceted. There's not a clear-cut line in the sand of when you pull the plug, when you don't, other than, if it's obviously a root fracture or obviously, furcal caries, like, okay, I can only do so much.
Right.
And like I tell my patients, I'm willing to throw a Hail Mary pass, but there has to be somebody downfield to catch it. That's the caveat.
Do you have, from a endo perspective, let's take caries out for a second, but from an endo perspective, do you have a final line in the sand where you would finally say, I don't think I can get an end result here that I would be happy with, that I'm going to want to see you on the schedule in 1 year because it's reinfected? Or are there a couple parameters or benchmarks that you've sort of encountered over the years that now are like guiding principles that you take into account?
Wow, JB, that was very prophetic. Very well said.
I want to know because I'm genuinely curious. I mean, I get the root fracture. I get the deep caries on crustal bone, but as an endodontist, I don't get it because I don't treat apices ever anymore.
So like the endo is the easy part. That's, I guess that's the challenge to get through, is that the endo, especially for an endodontist, I guess, is the easy part most of the time. It's the restoration. And we do a whole heck of a lot of resto here at our office. I'd say 80% of teeth that leave our office have a definitive restoration. Now let's talk direct composites, right? I'm not milling or crowning or prepping crowns or anything like that, but have a definitive restoration. So we're doing a lot of resto, but it's so, like you said, it's so multifaceted. It's hard for me to get out here and say, here's a parameter. I mean, I guess things I would say of like, if they have buccal lingual sinus tract and a probing depth on any tooth, like that's probably the kiss of death. But I put together a couple cases in PowerPoint. Why don't we, if it's okay with you guys, let me pull up with you, and then let me toss it to each one of you guys and let's walk through a few.
Would love that. Go
for
it.
Let's do it.
We're doing. Okay. All right. Let me screen share here if I can.
Close your browser history.
I ain't scared. All right. So I tried to date most of these, if not.
Oh, wait, hold on. We got to add you both.
Oh,
Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
What? It keeps pulling out every time.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. We got it.
All right. How's that? You see it?
That was like a rave.
You see a number
were you trying? Were you working against me, JB?
Might have been.
Are you guys seeing an 18, a distal bridge abutment?
Yes.
Okay, so let me give you a little history. This guy is in his.
I'm looking at money.
70s, 80s. I've treated him, his wife, his daughter, his grandson. So for an endo to treat 3 generations of people is crazy.
I think we can successfully say there may be a genetic predisposition here.
Yeah. Maybe. So I see this and I'm just like, right? So obviously I treated this tooth, but Jeffro, let's start with you. What do you see? What concerns you?
So I'm concerned. I mean, you know the world I live in, and my first concern are the functional forces here with that bridge. So first thing that's running through my mind is, even if we go in here and do the endo, can the perio recover with those functional forces as they are? And when I see a lucency that goes all the way around like that, yes, it could be of endodontic origin that worked its way all the way around. But I'm also thinking mesial root fracture or 100%. Something along those lines at the same time.
110%. That's kind of my thought, especially it's a lower second molar. It's the distal abutment of a bridge. I mean, you have the most
a bit of a J-shaped lesion.
Yeah. You just have all of a sudden these things that are aligning: a J-shaped lesion, lower second molar, bridge abutment, right? Like it's just kind of building up to what I would perceive as a root fracture.
Yeah.
And so what I told this patient was that clinically, I'm not seeing a sinus tract. I'm not seeing any abnormal probing defect. Now, again, that could just be the junctional epithelium attaching enough to prevent a probe. But what I said was, this is an important tooth for you, because if you lose this, then you lose essentially 3 teeth. So I said, let me open it at least and see if there's a fracture. And if I open it and I see there's a fracture, I'll be the first one to tell you that a root canal is not the right way to go. And also that just because I open it and don't see a fracture doesn't mean there's not one there. There's so many question marks. But if I can help prolong this tooth for you for a little while, where maybe that's a benefit. And he said, I agree. I don't want to do an implant, let alone two implants to make an implant bridge. So I was like, all right, this is kind of one of those hold my beer and let's try this moments. What do you think? What do you think happens?
Well, since I see endo, I'm guessing no fracture.
Okay, so I didn't see a fracture. Again, it doesn't mean it's not there. But fast forward a year, and here's where we're at.
It's really healing.
The healing.
Yeah, I mean, the periodontal lesion is healing beautifully.
Even with that distal open margin, it's healing right up.
Yeah.
Yes. So, I don't know. Let's see. I've been in practice 11 years now. Early on, my partner Saeed was more apt to treat these, and I was coming out of school saying, "Man, it's got a J-shaped lesion, second molar, bridge abutment. Just have him get it extracted." And he would open these teeth up. He's like, "I didn't see any fracture," and you'd get these this magnificent healing on these giant lesions. And so, Saeed really is kind of the one who prompted me to, I guess, think outside the box, if you will. And again, I even though I didn't see a fracture, I'll still tell him at his year recall that we're not out of the woods. This tooth still has 2 strikes. But
can I stop you for a second while I'm thinking of something, Ryan?
Sure.
Did you manage occlusion on this as well? Did you make sure there were no lateral forces on that tooth? Because I don't think that perio lesion heals unless you control the horizontal forces on that tooth.
Okay, so that's a great question. And again, I'll have to kind of parlay my partner into this, Saeed, in that we'll adjust the occlusion to a light centric and no excursive.
Okay.
So very intentionally that occlusal pattern on this tooth. And I'm an endodontist, so I don't want to claim that that's the best for everything. But in this particular case, it's like I only want.
You did sit in my course and ask good questions, though.
Jeff, You would be so proud. I channeled my inner Jeffro this week, and this lady came in and she had it was a number 30, had been fined for like 6 years. Sorry, fined for like 4 years. She's like, all of a sudden I started developing pain in the tooth. She's like, and I thought it was my bite. My bite was off. She went to her dentist, and her dentist was like, that's probably not going to develop occlusal discrepancy with no other change in 6 years. She came to me kind of asking for another opinion, and I said the same thing. And I channeled my inner Jeff Horowitz and said, it's very unlikely that your occlusal scheme without any extenuating circumstances would change. I said, the likelihood is this is an endo-related issue. And sure enough, it was.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'm not going to adjust the bite and see your back because that's the inappropriate treatment for this.
Love you.
I hope that was my take home from the Ada Aspire. But anyway.
Love you. Put
right,
away the handpiece.
Let me fast forward.
Go.
Okay, another case. JB, tell me what you see or what makes you concerned or what doesn't make you concerned.
Well, we have an existing root canal with what does appear to be some type of lesion or could be healing on the mesial root of number 30.
Okay.
And it does look, I mean, radiographically, it looks short, but it looks like the canal actually blunderbusts a little bit at the end as opposed to that nice taper. So
sure.
I don't know if that was just to keep it from blowing out of the back, the back end or whatever, but certainly there seems to be a concern. I will say the restorative, maybe there's distal caries on number 30, but kind of hard to tell from a PA whether or not that's an issue or not.
So I had
little ledging, but who's judging? Not me.
Me. I'm the endodontist. I'm judging that mesial ledge for sure. But no, I had the same thoughts you did. I'm like, okay, maybe a little distal caries, maybe some ledging. It's you see this root canal, you're like, I've seen a whole heck of a lot worse.
A heck of a lot worse.
Right. And so I'm like, okay, let's get a CT. I want to see what things are looking
like.
Well,
you do practice near Chad.
Yeah. Was this one of his first? And
we playing a special at our office.
We can beat up on him because I'm tired of getting beat up on tonight.
That's right.
We'll just pivot it to the guy who's not even here. So that's perfect.
Exactly.
So no, I think all those, you're saying all the right things. Like the root canal's adequate. I'm not seeing anything wild or crazy. So I took a CT on this case. And wrong way. Let's go this way. Now, seeing this, does that change your mind of what you're seeing?
A bit.
Right. So now we're seeing not only seeing the apical lesion, but we're seeing lateral lesion, lingual, and if you look, there's no buccal cortex.
No.
So all of a sudden, now we have this giant erosion of bone in this patient presented with only a buccal sinus tract at the mid-root level. Now, usually, if I'm thinking root fracture, I'm usually looking for a sinus tract kind of at the attachment of the gingiva to the tooth, right? So kind of in the sulcular area, but this was mid-root and on the buccal, not the lingual. And so I saw this and I said, hey, Mike, I was like this, let me be honest with you that I am happy to go ahead and jump in and redo and treat and whatever we can do. But I think the more predictable option is to consider extracting it because you have all of the very classic hallmark signs of a root fracture. And I don't want you to invest more time, money, or effort. So this one
probe?
It did not. It did not probe, not even adjacent to the sinus tract. I thought maybe I'd get where you probe just behind or closer to the tooth than the sinus tract, and I couldn't even get a probe there.
Interesting.
So, yeah, this guy now
this is a root amp all day for me.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking, JB.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you told me that, JB. Now I know somebody who does those.
I do have a few in my practice that I've inherited, and I'll be darned if they're not still here. I'm just saying.
I have a few cases like that as well, and they work.
Yeah.
They do.
In the right functioning patient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, I have this one, and then I have a little bit more just to show you, just for kicks and giggles, because I'm a big tooth nerd. But
do it.
All right, what do you see?
Well,
yeah, this looks like a fracture through the furcation to me.
Right,
that's the first thing I'm thinking.
I get this patient, and that's everything you guys just said. I'm like, look at the flat occlusion or the flat contour, if you will, on the crown. I'm like, kind of spindly roots to begin with. I'm like, shit. You're like, this is probably a fracture. I didn't get any probes. And again, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That last one didn't probe either. So go down the path of, could it be a fracture? I don't know. Let's open it and see. There's no existing root canal. There hasn't been any wedging forces per se inside the roots. I was like, let's try it. Let's at least open it. Pardon me. We'll see if there's any fracture. If there's not, we'll seal it and we'll see you back in a year. And so again, that's exactly what we did. Oh shoot. Let's fast. I know I have this here. Let's fast forward a year. We do this first. Good. Fast forward a year. And again, we have this remarkable healing. So I guess moral of the story here on these last couple of cases is that sometimes J-shaped radiolucencies, like Jeff mentioned earlier, are just long-standing endo lesions. It needs a path of least resistance, needs a place to go. And so kind of my line in the sand, if you will, is if it's got an isolated probing depth concurrent with very isolated bone loss around one root, usually I'll say that's a fracture. If I see this kind of bone loss circumferential or up an entire wall of a root and not just one narrow spot without probing, and it doesn't have a pre-existing root canal or inadequate root canal, I'm much more inclined to tell the patient, like, let's give it a shot. But if it's a nice root canal done by an endodontist and it has these things, most of the time I found that there's a fracture. So again, just kind of some general guidelines or a couple tidbits for y'all to tuck in your pocket, or tuck in the back of your mind rather, about root fractures. But I have to show this because we're talking about it, and I'm a tooth nerd. And so, yes, this is my SEM that we ran last fall on a tooth that I treated 3 years before that developed a root fracture. So I wanted to show you what a root fracture looks like under SEM and zoomed in like 40 times or so, so that we can kind of understand where the pathology comes from, right? So the upper left micrograph is the far left area you're seeing. This is crown. Directly below that's cementum, maybe some enamel flakes, but these are artifactual fractures, right? That's just from drying out the tooth. Mm-hmm. The fracture in the tooth, or what I call a crown turned into vertical root fracture, is this. And so look how it starts in the coronal portion of the tooth, moves to the mid root, and comes to the apical portion, but terminates. So it's not starting apex up, it's moving crown down. So if you think of the pathophysiology of this and how they develop, and then correlate that to our radiographic findings, this would create maybe some cratering bone loss in the cervical area. As it moves down, now we get that more J-shaped lesion. And once we get down to the apical third, if that bacteria from the oral environment's colonizing that fracture and just following its superhighway apically, that's how you develop that J-shaped lesion, and why the bacteria are kind of in those areas, and thus why you have an isolated probing depth along the side of that tooth, is because it's following the fracture. The bacteria create the bone loss, and thus then we have our probing defect.
This is really cool. And was this an extracted tooth, obviously? At what point, though, on these vertical fractures, do they become symptomatic?
No,
that's always
patient under the microscope, JB.
Shut it.
So no, I treated this lady. This is number 20. I treated it, and she had a small apical, what appeared to be apical. I should have taken a cone beam because I'd be surprised now if it were just apical. But this is the distal wall of tooth number 20. And I treated it and saw her back. She failed her 1 year recall, and I saw her back in 2 years, I think was how it went. And it was inconclusive healing. So I saw her for a third, and then it just got much, much larger. The lateral J-shaped lesion was just very expansile at that point. So we had the tooth extracted. I talked to the surgeon, was able to keep the tooth. So that's kind of the long story on that.
I want to look at the case you just showed, the healing image. See, to me, when I see that secondary image of the healing, even if at the end of the day that becomes an implant, the implant prognosis even is so much better on the 2024 image than the 2023 image, with all of that bacterial infiltrate, I think is one of the large predisposing existing characteristics that could potentially ruin an implant. Is that, yes, we can curette and curettage a socket, but the bacteria is living well within the marrow space at that point. And if it colonizes around your implant, the failure rate goes up. And I definitely see a higher failure rate amongst those that have had long-standing infections that were never treated. And so even if, I think as dentists, we're really bad about putting a timestamp on how long we think our dentistry should be successful. And sometimes it's just to get a patient. Like, I've definitely referred a person to get a root canal done because I need them out of pain to make clear decisions, not because I think it's the final decision. It's like, I just, if you don't want to lose a tooth or you don't know what to do, then let me just at least get you out of pain so that we can then have clarity of discussion,
clarity in the decision
and so, because pain is a highly motivating factor to make really poor decisions. And on the very flip side of seeing that radiograph, if you've seen that healing, the prognosis of an implant, even if that tooth's long-term prognosis is only a year or two, the implant replacement is going to be far successful after you've done that root canal and seen the healing coming behind that, as opposed to trying to put it in while that active lesion was in place, and trying to have a healthy socket. I mean, I don't know what the data is. Maybe Jeff does.
No, this is such a great point because there's so much pressure now to do that as an immediate procedure, extract, curette the hell out of it, and get that implant in right away. But what you said makes complete sense. I would much rather be putting that implant in a non-infiltrated area. And I don't care, just what you said, I don't care how well you curette, I don't care what you do. There is still, going to be a much higher level of bacterial infiltrate in that area if you are going into an area that has, an endodontically affected tooth. So,
well, and then you put a graft, you take it, you curette the heck out of it, and then you put something that's synthetic or artificial in that and expect, number one, the bacteria to not ruin the thing that you've just put in there.
I don't know that the graft is any better than putting the implant in.
I don't either. I don't even know if the graft is better than a Heliplug or even just a membrane with no material in it. And
hopefully you can get enough bone regeneration, agreed 100% on the bacterial contamination. But if we can at least get some bone support to add back in, I mean, great. Everybody these days is such good grafters and we have such good grafting material. But if we can get the body to do part of it for us, I mean, that takes a lot of the guesswork out of the end result, right? So even if this tooth fails in a year and we start seeing some vertical bone loss or something, it's like, okay, cool. We've done what we can. Pull the plug now before you develop that J-shaped bone loss again, and let's get the implant. Hopefully that won't be the case. Hopefully this will be a long-term solution, but nonetheless, it's like, hopefully that sets up for better success long-term.
So two quick ones, because we are actually over time now, but I love this. I think this might have been one of my favorite shows ever, JB, just because Chad wasn't here. No.
Number one, because Chad wasn't here.
No, but the interaction and just the thing, the way they presented that on was beautiful. To have those slides ready and have us all talk about it, I thought that was absolutely brilliant. But two quick questions. Tell me your perspective on root perforations, calcified roots, you perf, at what point do you say we try to save the perforation? When do we extract? And then we'll answer that first, and then I'll ask you the other question.
Yeah. So the main things or the critical factors of the perforations are two. How big is the perf and how long has it been there? So if I create the perf looking for an MB2 or something like that, I think the prognosis of that tooth, if I can repair it right away with neo putty, with regen putty, with MTA, something like that, get a tricalcium silicate material over it, that's, I don't want to say it's the same as if the perf weren't there, but that's as close as you could possibly get. If you have like a lateral root perf where you're just like digging and digging and digging for a canal and you just can't get it to come out, I still think the prognosis is favorable because you can always move to do an apico or something like that, where you're treating the apical portion, or even like JB was just saying, root amp, where you amp it up to the point of the perforation and then repair that just like an apico. And we've had a bunch of those at our offices that have been favorable long term. So yeah. I don't want to paint with broad brushstrokes, but by and large, we can repair perfs pretty effectively these days.
Okay. And then, so second question is just about apicos, because a lot of us here, why would you send someone for a procedure that, and again, broad brushstrokes, but across the board, 50 to 60% success rate. And again, across the industry, not talking about your hands and your apicos, but that's kind of the common conception of apicoectomies. So what point do you refer for an apico, and what point do you say, or is it, what's your perspective on that?
I guess first I would say that percentage of apicos is very historical. So I don't think that's
I'm very historical.
Right. That's kind of what I was alluding to. Like when you went through dental school and composite wasn't invented yet, like that was accurate. But no, I would say apicos these days are, 80, 90% successful. 90 might be aggressive, but 80 some percent successful when you're doing it appropriately, right? So we have microscopes, we have some di and tricalcium silicates, again, like Neoputty, Regen Putty, MTA, stuff like that. But more importantly, we have so many other diagnostic aids like CBCTs, microscopes, things like that. So we're doing a lot less apicos than we were historically, but our apicos are very successful because
the ones that you do are more successful because of the diagnostic tools that you have.
Right. So we're picking and choosing which ones, like, okay, I'd apico this, as opposed to that one case where we had that bone loss all the way up the lateral surface of that number 30. When the endo looked okay, I had already had the conversation of doing an apico with him. And then I saw the CBCT. I'm like, there's not a snowball's chance in hell I can save this tooth with the best apico in the world. So in those cases, like we're just better. We're better at picking and choosing what's going to be successful because, we're retreating a lot of cases these days and getting a lot better success as opposed to rushing to do an apico. The number one cause of apico failure is bad endo to begin with. So if we can circumvent the bad endo and know we're doing apico on good endo teeth that don't have any other concomitant bad factors, then I think we're looking good.
I'm just glad you shared that, because there's a lot of people like me who may not even have been doing this as long as I have, and as much CE as I do, we can't be abreast of everything. Sure. And I think that there are a lot of misconceptions in dentistry like that one. So I think that was important for everybody to hear out there. So thank you.
One other thing real quick is that we have retreated so many previously apicoed teeth just to find an MB2. Yeah. Because the tooth was treated, then it was apicoed, and then it failed again. I'm like, well, of course, because there's a missed MB2 that our CBCT shows us. Get back in, retreat that MB2, pack it with MTA, and then the darn thing heals. It's like, okay, great. We treated the original etiology of the failure by doing a retreat and not a resurgery. So
amazing. All right. Well, we have run over, but Ryan, this is really it's been great. I really don't miss Chad at all. I don't know about you, JB, but
no,
honestly, I'm feeling a little love right here, little bromance.
Yeah. Adamo's gonna get a little jelly, but overall,
we need to get him on here too.
Maybe we can show the four of us.
Right. I think that really probably is the sweet spot.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Ryan, thank you. JB, why don't you close us out tonight?
Ryan, you are now my favorite donk, and we're so glad that you came on. I hope I get to see you soon. It's been a bit since we've gotten to since we've hung out. But when I sent you a text today, I saw our last picture together in Mexico, which wasn't terrible. So that was pretty awesome.
Loving it.
Thanks so much to everybody for joining tonight. Hopefully you learned a little bit. I love tonight's discussion. It's very rare that we totally geek out with radiographs to boot, but tonight was, I think, one of our more recent favorite episodes. Don't forget that you can always catch us a few days later on our podcast channel and all of our other previous fantastic interviews, both on our YouTube and podcast channels. And if you haven't joined our private Facebook group, you can do so as well. We're here to serve and support. We just thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Have a great night.
Good night, Donk.
Good night, Dinks. Thanks for having me on.